colleagues. Good morning, esteemed guests. My name is Tukisang. Thank you, Linda, for the welcome. As she said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Vision Quest Institute, which is based in South Africa. And we are in the business of leadership development, transformational leadership for purposes of business growth, development, and advancement. And the agriculture sector is one of those sectors with which we work. So we are very pleased to be here as part of this Market Access Africa meeting today. So as Linda has said, our session is going to be titled Future Farming Scaling Production Capacities for Africa's Agricultural Boom. And in this session, we'll focus on innovative solutions needed to overcome various bottlenecks that limit the potential of Africa's agricultural sector. And our discussion will cover a number of areas, including achieving gross production value in the various sectors of agriculture. We look forward to a dynamic and engaging discussion with an eminent panel that I will introduce to you. As we all know, we started a bit late today because of logistical challenges that some of our delegates faced. We actually have seen that affecting this particular panel because two of our panelists, Ms. Suzanne Payne, as well as Mr. Bobby Kimbugwe, are unable to join us this morning. But that said, we have two other panelists that I'm going to introduce and I'm going to call to the stage. First off, we have Ms. Ayokanmi Ayuba, who's the Country Program Director for TechnoServe Nigeria. Let's welcome her as she comes. So Ms. Ayuba is a strong leader and high performer with over 20 years of progressive experience in various areas of management, including program management, project management, strategic planning, resource management, stakeholder management, and design thinking for programming as well as innovation. So she has lots of industry experience across international development, technology, youth education, advisory, as well as market-based approaches to economic development. So welcome, ma'am. Yes, please do give her a round of applause. And our second panelist is Mr. Ramesh Moochikal, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Improved Foods BV based in Rwanda. Mr. Ramesh is a senior global leader with over 3 decades of financial and operating acumen, having successfully managed businesses through several business cycles. He possesses a deep experience in starting up, growing, as well as leading agri and food sector businesses in developing and frontier markets. And so essentially he's an Africa specialist, known in the industry for thought leadership in this sector and managing corporate as well as policy-making relationships at the highest levels. So let's welcome our panelists. So I'll sit over here just so that we keep this conversational. Welcome, welcome, colleagues. Are the mics okay? Okay. Yeah, all right. We're good to go.
We can share this.
Okay. While they sort out the technicalities, so let me start with Mr. Moochikal. Firstly, let's take it home first to say, can you kindly elaborate on the role of public-private partnerships, in overcoming production bottlenecks and scaling agricultural operations, which I think has been a theme of some of the keynote addresses this morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So the company that I manage right now is a perfect example of a very successful PPP. And the reason I say so is because on one side we have development banks like the IFC and the FMO who are shareholders. On the other side we have a significant Dutch private sector company called the Royal DSM, who is a global leader in micronutrients, who is a third partner. And the government of Rwanda is an invested partner as well through its sovereign fund. The idea of the partnership was primarily to help battle malnutrition in Rwanda. And while we have marked significant success over the last 7 years, the fact of the matter is the capacity to play is facilitated by the country commitment through Agachiro, which is the country's sovereign fund. But the capacity to bring technology of the best order comes from the private sector partner. And I think that is the best method to operate. The financing partners are the development banks. So between financing, technology, and policy framework, we have a partnership that truly works. Over the last 7 years, for your information, 7 years back, 1 in 2 children in Rwanda were affected by stunting. Today it's become 1 in 3. So 49% has become 35%. While that is significant improvement, there is still room for significantly greater improvement here on. But the fact is, this combination has worked. So that's a real live example of how PPP has worked.
No, that's great. And I think the impact that you are sharing in terms of just how you are able to manage better food security actually speaks volumes. So let me just ask Ms. Ayuba. In your TechnoServe enterprise or organization, ma'am, what innovation solutions have you implemented to help smallholder farmers to increase their production capacities, particularly in the dairy and fresh produce sectors?
All right. So, just for those that may not know what we do at TechnoServe. TechnoServe is an international non-profit organization, and our mission for the past 56 years is fighting poverty. And we do this by working with enterprising women, men, youths, people generally in the developing countries. So we are in over 30 developing countries today. And we work with them to build enterprising farms, competitive farms, markets, and industries. Agriculture is one of the areas of our excellence, and we work directly with the smallholder farmers. In Nigeria, we have worked with over 100,000 smallholder farmers to date, and millions across Africa. So one of the ways that we have worked in order to boost their productivity is first of all, I will always say farmer organization. Organizing the farmers into groups. That cannot be underemphasized. We must be able to do that. When they are in small groups of 25 to 30, they're able to work together, they're able to save together. They are able to aggregate demand, aggregate input demand, and do quite a number of things together. We have found that that is one of the success factors, right? So innovatively, we have now formalized these groups. So we ensure that they have leadership, structure, bylaws, and so on and so forth. So that way that they are also attractive to input credit. So if there's going to be input credit, that is an attraction, the formalization of the groups. Added to that, we also work on capacity building of these farmers. And we do that through radio. We do that through the use of demonstration plots. We use mobile technology. We use videos through mobile technology where applicable, because it's not all the farmers who have mobile phones. So where applicable, we use the videos. And then also we have toll-free lines. So we also have toll-free lines where they can call in, and members of the team can respond to them. Now, in terms of post-harvest loss reduction, where there is a great, where we know that that is a great impediment for them, because I mean many times they lose their produce to different environmental factors. So one of the things we've tried to do is that we have piloted as an organization different cooling facilities, simple cooling facilities like the zero energy cooling chambers at the farm levels, cold hubs, cold hubs, yes, we call them cold hubs. They are containers, solar powered containers, at the aggregation level. But the main goal is to be able to extend the shelf life of these perishables, especially in a tomato project that we were involved in a few years ago, where we worked with over 37,000 tomato farmers in 5 states of the north. So we piloted quite a number of these solutions to ensure that it will mitigate against post-harvest losses. I'll stop there because I think the other questions will also bring up a number of solutions that we have worked with. Yeah.
Great, no, thanks for that. And I think while you're raising the model that you're using with the women farmers, I'm reminded of Mohammed Yunus's Grameen Bank,
Yeah.
which really was based on exactly that model, where they were able to pilot and innovate a way to lend to small, not even farmers, because a lot of them were like women who were selling at marketplaces, but exactly the same method.
Yeah.
And I think that the power of group accountability and peer accountability actually comes forth in that.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I think that's quite interesting. And so, Mr. Moochikal, coming back to Africa Improved Foods BV, how do you address the challenge of scaling up production while ensuring the nutritional quality of dairy and fresh produce products particularly?
So while in the past we've always discussed the potential of Africa, I think what has remained undisclosed is how do you make it happen? Okay. So in the end, all the talk we can talk about potential and plans is great, but if you don't convert that into real action, nothing changes. What we have done is to truly change, and I'll explain how. So when we started 7 years back, we were buying maize and soya from the local farmers to convert that into nutritious food that eventually ends up in relief camps and for the consumption of children, largely below the age of 5. Okay. Now, 98% of the maize that reached our factory was rejected on account of aflatoxin. Now, all of us who are in agriculture know that aflatoxin is one of the biggest challenges in any crop, anywhere in Africa. And the primary reason for that is the post-harvest treatment. Now, if aflatoxin-ridden crop comes to any factory for any crop, there's nothing the factory process can do for it. It's irreversible. So the trick is to be able to manage post-harvest treatment so that aflatoxin doesn't build up in the first place. Prior to this, there are 4 real pillars which can change or transform production. One is the quality of seed. I have now worked for 32 years in African agriculture, and I know the primary problem with good quality seed entering African agriculture is policymakers' mindset, and that has to change. I spent 8 years negotiating with the government of Mozambique to change the seed in cotton in Mozambique. The Mozambican cotton farmer is the poorest farmer in the world. Next door neighbor is Zimbabwe, who is a significant producer of cotton and at one time was the best producer of cotton in Africa. But the two will not talk, and the two will not agree, and the two will not change their minds about the fact that Zimbabwean seed can come to Mozambique and the cotton farmer's fate can change. So policymakers' mindset around seed has to change. Number 2 is inputs. What kind of support, what kind of subsidy is the farmer receiving to use inputs? Anil talked earlier about the significantly fractional use of inputs in African farmers' life, because of which yields are not changing. So inputs has to be subsidized and provided to the last mile for the farmer to be able to use it. Only then can life change. The third is pre-crop financing. I'll give you a small example. When I worked in Ghana with the cocoa farmer, the cocoa season and the Ghana's cocoa board is among the best organized parastatals in Africa. Having said that, the first cocoa bean appears in the end of September, and the cocoa farmer therefore receives his first dime against his life's earnings, which is the cocoa crop, somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd week of October. School fees have to be paid in August. What does the farmer do? And these are farmers who are living hand to mouth. 5 bags, 6 bags, 8 bags is the annual production that they have. So companies like Olam that I used to work for provide this pre-financing. And unless private sector does that, life is not going to change. Okay, so that's the third aspect. And the fourth aspect to change production is post-harvest treatment. Now I'll give you, in the case of Africa Improved Foods, the University of Chicago has done a study as to how we have impacted the Rwandan economy by $1 billion, and I'll explain how. These 90,000 farmers that we work with today deliver maize to us where only 1% is rejected. So from 98%, We have transformed post-harvest treatment, resulting in only 1% rejection. Can you imagine the kind of value that is created for the farmer? Number two, because we work with 200 cooperatives, which encompass these 90,000 farmers, yields have changed from 2.5 tons per hectare to 7 tons per hectare. Okay, can you again imagine the kind of impact there is? Now this increases production, increases wealth creation for the farmer, and makes the farmer's life that much more secure. These small-scale farmers have been doing exactly the same thing for the last 500 years. And there are no rich small-scale farmers in Africa or anywhere in the developing world precisely for that reason. So unless we change practices and support systems, life is not going to change.
And I think for me, it speaks a lot to where we are now as a continent with the Africa Free Trade Agreement, being very topical. That if you find one country doing very well on some of these areas, like the cotton farming example you made between Zimbabwe as compared to Mozambique, which are neighboring to each other, and both of whom are neighboring South Africa, we all need to be able to learn from that and leverage where best practice comes from. And perhaps it's a challenge to all of us to start looking at how do we document those lessons so that they can then be shared and be scaled, because I think the Africa Continental Trade Agreement does actually challenge us to actually bring all of these to life. So I'm quite excited to hear that. Going back to Ms. Ayuba, how do you believe market access can be improved for smallholder farmers to ensure that increased production leads to better economic outcomes?
So Mr. Ramesh here has touched on a few things. And at TechnoServe, we work across the value chain. So we work both on the demand side and the supply side. While we try to fix the supply side, which is basically improve yields and reduce post-harvest loss, which means, all the activities, post-harvest handling and so on, we also have to work on the demand side, because if we improve the yields and the farmers are producing more, then we must work with those who will demand to scale their ability and their capacity to offtake more, right? And so many times, so to answer that question, on the demand side, we work with processors, right? Processors who do value creation, in order to improve their capacity. And this can come through matching grants. On some of our projects, we have provided matching grants in order to optimize their processing facilities, their processing lines. We've provided technical assistance to boost their ability to process more. So that is on the demand side. Now, for the smallholder farmers, the first thing I would say for them, which is the supply side, is access to information. Access to information as to where are these markets? What are the expectations of this market concerning the quality of my produce? Because a number of them do not have that idea. So first of all is that information. To be able to know that there is a market beyond my community, beyond my locality. But in order to do that, the quality of my produce must meet the requirements. For instance, we've just completed a project with a global processor where it was a grains project. And in that project, it was really to reduce the shipment rejection rate. At the beginning of the project, it was almost 50% of the shipment was being rejected. At the end of the project, only 2%, we achieved 2% rejection. And as Mr. Ramesh says, that increases their incomes and improves their livelihood. So information around quality, which speaks to the right seeds, the right inputs, and so on and so forth. The second thing is active participation of the private sector. The private sector really needs to move away from just off-taking commodity or produce. We need to move into setting up inclusive outgrower models where you are actually having this, integrating these smallholder farmers into your supply chain. What does this do? First of all, it ensures sustained inputs for production. But more importantly, it also encourages the farmers to continue producing, to continue to invest in what is required in order to meet the quality standard of the processor. So the private sector is very key in ensuring that market access for the farmers. And last but not the least, I always will say government participation, but of course that's the big elephant in the room. Government participation is very important. It is key. Government participation in providing the enabling environment for market access. In some of the projects, I remember again, I referenced the tomato projects. There was an issue down south, South Nigeria, where where there was a supply problem, sorry. And yet, at the farm gate in Katsina, in Kaduna, in Kano, in Jigawa, in Plateau, there were tomatoes that were not even harvested. They were there rotting on the trees. So you can see that there was a demand and supply fracture, which we tried to address, because it was telling them that, look, you can move this over to the north, but because of the infrastructure, logistic infrastructure and so on, that was also prohibitive. So these are the things that really need to happen in order to, really make market access, viable for the smallholder farmers.
Yeah. And thank you very much. And I think that's a mouthful that you've shared. But just while you have the mic, where do you see the gender lens coming in to add an element of almost like the cutting edge or competitive edge into that story as well?
Yes, thank you very much. So one of the things we do very well, and thank you for that, is that we have a gender policy. And the gender policy is that not less than 40% of the farmers that we work in must be women. And I can assure you that in sustainable farming practices, it's not possible without the woman. We have realized it without the female farmers, even though a number of them are not involved in production. They are usually not involved in the northern part of the country where we work. They are not usually involved in production. So one of the things in order to scale production is to increase the number of farmers that are producing. And so we bring in the women there. Train the women. Train the women in the production, train the women, put them in groups, so female-only groups. And we found out that when it came to recovery of input loans, we got almost 100% recovery from the women. So the truth of the matter is that in order to progress across the continent in agriculture, there must be female participation. We also realized that females adopt very easily. It's very amazing. The adoption rate among female farmers can be very significantly more than their counterparts. And so we are always, one of the things we must always do is ensure that females are female farmers, female aggregators, female input suppliers, farm managers, because we set up farmer service centers. So we ensure that some of them are managed by females, just to ensure that where they bring the strength, we can leverage on the strength of the female farmers. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And I think the audience appreciates that. So as we look to wrap up, I just want to to ask you both this question because I think the one element of it is already been covered in what you've raised. So what I'd like for you to just focus on as we look to wrap up is when you now look ahead, you know, what sort of future trends do you foresee in the agricultural sector, and how can stakeholders prepare to capitalize on those trends to boost production capacities? So maybe we can start with you, Mr. Ramesh.
So I'd like to suggest that there is a significant amount of commitment and technology that can be spent on seed development. There is a lot of opportunity for any investor wanting to do that on the African continent. There is very little that's being done. So that's one opportunity for private sector to really participate in. So seed breeding, seed development, seed distribution, primarily with a view to increasing yields. And it's an easy story to sell in any farming stories of Africa. Number two is that my experience, and I have a lot of experience in farming itself because of my work with OLAM, was that after trying multiple models of trying to make this work, we were very clear that at the heart of every African farming agricultural solution lies the African small-scale farmer. There is no way around that, number one. Number two, which means that as a corporate, if you want to commit to farming, then the method to do that, and we did that successfully in many farms across Africa. We did coffee farming in Zambia, coffee farming in Tanzania, rice farming in Nigeria, etc., etc. You must have a nucleus farm which is corporate driven. So that will be high yield, which will have irrigation available, technology, electricity, all of that, you know, in place. Around that, you will have small scale farmers of at least equal number. I'll give you an example. 3,000 hectares of coffee farm in Zambia, in the north of Zambia, where I don't know when last coffee was ever grown there. Around that 6,000 small scale farmers producing as much as the nucleus farm produced. They had access to the seed, they had access to the irrigation water, they had access to the input, and of course, they had irrigation to the best agricultural practices. Apart from that, there was a guaranteed buyback of their coffee at the same price at which the coffee was being bought from the Olam's nucleus farm. Okay. Using that format, the small scale farmer can improve and be significantly upgraded, and the corporate can get full value through the guaranteed nucleus farm that it puts up. That is the only format in which African agriculture can be developed. So I think that is the way we need to look at to make things happen.
Thanks for that, Mr. Ramesh. Ms. Ayuba?
Yeah, so in my mind, the future trends will be shaped by advancement in technology, which Mr. Ramesh has spoken to, shifting consumer preferences, and environmental issues. And so I will leave technology behind because he's spoken a bit of it. And I will talk about environmental issues and the challenges that we are facing as a result of climate change. We have seen an increase in flooding, we have seen an increase in drought. And it is very important that, I mean, as we go into the future, that these are mitigated. In fact, we have started mitigations against this and ensuring that the soil health and so on and so forth. So one thing I do see is that there will be, I mean, the use of emphasis on regenerative agriculture. Practices like minimum tillage, practices like cover cropping, practices like tree planting, practices like optimization of the use of water and use of water, fertilizer, and pesticides. So those are areas that are, I mean, those are areas that we have started. We just completed a pilot using regenerative agricultural practices that was supported by Nestle, because Nestle has recently made a global compact, I mean a global declaration that 20% of their inputs will be off-taken from farms that practice regenerative agriculture. And a number of organizations are following suit. So it is important that we know that this is going to be the language of the future, regenerative agriculture, and how we can implement that in all the farms, right? Gradually, we know that there are challenges. And then finally, the rise of urban agriculture, of vertical agriculture. I mean, it's investment in vertical agriculture infrastructure. Many of us have been turned farmers at home in the urban areas, using tires, using jute sack, using all kinds of all kinds of packaging to grow. So I see that as a trend, that an ongoing trend in the future. Yeah.
Great. No, thank you very much, both colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings us to the end of our first session, and I'm happy to announce that we've come to the end of it, and I'm hoping that you've gained quite a bit of insights from these experts, and we're looking forward to us going on. But before we do wrap up, I think we can, from Linda's indication, we can perhaps take one or two questions from the audience. Let's do that, and then we'll wrap up.
Good morning. Very insightful conversation. Thank you. My name is Riskia Badmos. I work with GIZ, and my question is to Ms. Ayuba from TechnoServe. Fantastic work that you're doing with women. Well done. I just want to get insight from you. Experience has shown that women do not play in the production space largely, and this has to do with cumulative issues, mostly around access to land, which is a big barrier. We're not going to delve into that. But I like the fact that you're trying to solve the challenge and you're inculcating women into production. But I also want to just share experience in terms of production versus processing. Processing is value addition, additional money. Are you getting more insight? Are women really, really interested in production? For instance, farming rice is quite tedious. Do we want to move women towards production, or we want to move them towards processing, much more processing, helping them to do the value add because you have additional money? What is your experience and what is your position on this in terms of, do we just do we inculcate more into production, or we continue to advocate for processing and value addition? Thank you.
Thank you. Do I go ahead? Okay. Do I go ahead? All right. So thank you. Riskat, right? Yes. So a few years ago, we worked in rice production with about over 3,000 women in northern Nigeria. Women who had never been involved in rice production before. Again, that's why the group farmer organization is very critical. Working together in groups. So what we did in that was to have a conversation with the state government where we rented land, right? A contiguous land where all of them were. And where all of them were able to cultivate side by side. So a number of the activities they did together as groups. So a group could have 20 hectares and each woman has 0.2, 0.5 hectares. And in that group, in some of those groups, they decided that they were also going to process what they were producing. And this was rice. So they went ahead and processed into flour and so on and so forth. So to your question is that I believe that women can be involved in both. Right now we have food insecurity. We need all hands on deck. There are women that are happy to join the production. They are happy to be producing as well as value addition. So yes, some of them did that along with groundnuts. So they also produce groundnuts and also process groundnuts into groundnut oil, into groundnut cake, and so on and so forth. And we were able to extend their market in southern Nigeria, especially for the oil. So yes, we should continue to involve them in, and one way to reduce the toil of production is through mechanization, right? So mechanization comes into play here. Yeah.
Great. I think we can take the second question now.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Abdullah Ishiru. I represent Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC. I discovered that most people that are doing investment in this country, they do not even know the existence of Nigeria Investment Promotion. We're there to serve you people, and we're in collaboration with Nigerian Export Promotion Council. I believe most of the investment in agricultural sector, you always love to export most of the products you guys are producing. We're invited here today to come and share some of the incentives that most of the investors can benefit from NIPC. We're here to collaborate with you, we're here to support you, and we're here to support your investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's a clarion call to all of us that are sitting here to engage with the Commission to ensure that we can see how we can leverage all the support they're providing. Is there a question that could be taken, and then we'll wrap up after?
Hi. Good morning. It's a wonderful presentation and discourse by both of you. My question, not exactly a question, I would like to know a little bit more. My name is Vishwajit Sinha. I'm with Dangote Fertilizers. And definitely all of you sitting here are customers. Rather, you are in fact route to my main customer. And we discussed a lot about the fertilizer consumption and other agri-input consumption, which is key to the food security. This question is to Madam. She talked about farm produce organization. And you said that, in fact, a lot of smallholders, they have collaborated together and established a farm produce organization where they are, in fact, not only doing a good agriculture produce, at the same time they are doing some value addition in terms of processing of the agricultural produce. Could you please little bit elaborate how this farm produce organization is being recognized here by the government of Nigeria in terms of extending soft and easy access to the rural credit? Because in order to having a higher productivity, you need some kind of a more agricultural financing in terms of seeds, fertilizers, crop protection chemicals, and more importantly, mechanization. So how does really it is being recognized or being extended by the Nigerian banks in terms of rural credit? Do they have that kind of a facility here?
Okay, so thank you. So what we have done on our projects is that basically, like you have said, most of the financing required by the smallholder farmers is for production, because the cost of production, as someone remarked, is quite high. And I'm sure that I speak for most of Africa, right, in terms of cost of inputs, cost of fertilizer, and so on and so forth. Now, when we started out with collaborations with the banks. But you and I know that the banks have very little appetite for the smallholder farmers. And unfortunately, there is no risk, guaranteed risk mechanism in place that mitigates the risk that the banks foresee. So what did we do? We worked, and that's why we work with private sector. Private sector is very key in what we do. So we work with off-takers that are small or medium-sized companies. Currently in Zaria, we're working with 6 aggregators of grains, right? And basically what they do is that they provide the input financing to the farmers. And when production is over, they collect, the payback is in form of produce, which has already been agreed. So there's an agreement ab initio before the production season starts. And so that is why I said that we need the involvement of the private sector. I mean, the private sector makes this happen. I'm talking of private sector in terms of off-takers, in terms of processors. right? The banks typically don't have this, don't have the appetite for the smallholder farmers. So that is what has worked in terms of input financing. I hope I've answered your question.
Great. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your indulgence. This brings us to the end of our session. Thank you, Ms. Ayuba. Thanks, Mr. Moochikal. And we're hoping that we're going to continue the conversations afterwards as well. Thank you very much.